What a wild comeback win for the Kansas State Wildcats in the Rate Bowl. Let's talk about it.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers, and this is a good one. This is the fun one, folks, because we got the win in the Rate Bowl. It was a very good one. It was a very fun one, and if we would have had a show at halftime, it would be a completely different feeling, but Kansas State wins this one 44-41 in an epic comeback fashion. We got plenty to talk about in this show. I see some comments already coming in on the show. We're going to get to them. If you have questions, comments, fun things, definitely drop them in here. We're going to show them up. I see a guy, Robbie Schultz, dropping in already. What a comeback, and you're absolutely right. What a comeback. If you're listening in audio form after the show, don't worry. We're going to have this up on the podcast feeds. Thank you so much. And if you're watching here on YouTube, please do me a favor. Hit like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We're trying to get to 200 subscribers by the end of the year as we're just getting started here on Locked On Kansas State. But plenty to talk about. First, before we get started, this episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off your first purchase. Well, what a fantastic win for Kansas State in this one. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I have so many notes right here. I have 2 notebooks ready to roll for this one. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, if this one ended at halftime, it would be a completely different conversation we're having. I had a different graphic loaded up. I had epic fail, worst bowl game ever, ? I was prepared to really come on this show and not be as excited as I was. But things changed. Things flipped around. There was really good halftime adjustments. And this team showed grit and gave us some good momentum and gave us something to be excited about heading into 2025. There was a lot to be excited about heading into 2025. And I think the number one thing to be excited about and things to really just get all warm and fuzzy on is Dylan Edwards. Although DJ Giddens decided to declare for the NFL draft, skip his final season at Kansas State, he did not play in the bowl game. It looks like the running back position is in really good hands with Dylan Edwards, with Joe Jackson. I loved that the broadcast. I didn't like a lot of things the broadcast said, but one thing I did like is that they said he was thunder and lightning, those two. And I couldn't agree more. They are a fantastic duo in this one. And Dylan Edwards just went off. I mean, he was absolutely crazy. 18 carries, 196 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That was just his rushing. He also had 2 receptions for 27 yards and a touchdown receiving. You get him on the outside, and it is game over. Even with those terrible field conditions that the baseball stadium had, Chase Field. It was at a baseball stadium. And we kind of knew that Bermuda grass wasn't going to be very good for football conditions. And we were right. But Dylan Edwards found a way to make it happen. And he was fantastic. We need to see more of that in 2025. I think we got a good taste of what Connor Riley can do when the games, unfortunately, don't matter. We need to make that turn into what happens when games do matter and put a guy like Dylan Edwards on the outside a lot more. I want to see a lot more of those jet sweeps. How about you? Because I definitely do. I want to see those outside plays, and we saw it with Jace Brown as well. Love all these comments coming in, folks. Definitely keep coming because we are going to I'm going to answer all those questions and bring them up later on in the show. So thank you so much for joining. This is exciting. This is our first live show here on Locked On Kansas State. We're going to be doing plenty more of them, especially with the basketball season coming up. Got to talk about Dylan Edwards. Like, as I said, I got 2 of these notebooks coming up. Right off the bat, he had that 10-yard gain, and I could tell that he was playing good. And that was inside the tackles too. That first 10-yard gain was inside the tackles. Most of his yards obviously came on the outside. Both teams, but especially Rutgers, had a really hard time containing the edge. And it was just really good to see Dylan Edwards do that. I want to talk about Avery Johnson. And as I mentioned at the beginning of this show, I was prepared to have a completely different show when we were starting off, started at halftime to the end of the game. And if I was talking to you at halftime, if we went live at halftime, I would have a completely different feeling about Avery Johnson's performance. It was very flat at the beginning of the game. He missed some very key throws at the beginning. Yes, he had some great rushes to score touchdowns. He did fine there. But things turned around for him, and he started to look really good in that second half and put the team on his shoulders and did exactly what we expected the leader of this Kansas State team to do. And yes, well, I'm glad that he is all in and he's bought into this team, and he absolutely should be. And everybody is rallying by him. You can tell that this is Avery Johnson's team. There's no doubt about that, folks. You can see it with the players that decided to stick back and stay and not enter the transfer portal, like guys like Dylan Edwards, like guys like Jace Brown, who, by the way, Connor Riley did a fantastic job feeding them in this game. So even though there's 2 days left in the portal, I don't think those guys are going anywhere anytime soon. But Avery Johnson, I would say that he struggled in the first half. There was definitely some issues where he was flat, some key misses. That interception in the second quarter was rough. It was an interesting play call. First off, him rolling out to that side, he had to set up, go completely shift his hips to make that throw, and it was just a bad throw all around, bad play. Overall, though, I think he played a very good game. He is now the leader of all time for season record for touchdown passes in a season. He did pass Will Howard in that one, so fantastic. Congratulations, Avery Johnson. Must deserved. And oh, by the way, he did it in his first season as a starting quarterback for Kansas State, in his first full season. So you got to like that. I don't think he's going to be the MVP. I didn't stick around. I came live as soon as the game was over. I don't think he's going to be the Rate Bowl MVP like he was last year for the Pop-Tarts Bowl. I'm guessing it's Dylan Edwards, if they even named an MVP. If they did, let me know in the comment section below. But we should name it right here. The MVP of this one was Dylan Edwards. Joe Jackson played good too, though. You know, even though Edwards took over the show, 349 yards rushing on the ground with 196 from Edwards and 50 from Joe Jackson on only 7 carries. You got to really like what you see out of there. 25 carries between the two and just under 250 yards. I mean, I take that every Saturday. How about you? I definitely would take that all the time. You got some really nice jet sweeps from Jace Brown as well. You gave him 5 receptions. You gave him 3 other carries. You got him a chance to eat. This offense looked really good. Even with the woes and the concerns that we had heading into halftime, I was still not upset about this offense. I was more worried about the defensive side, which we're going to get to in just a minute. But overall, this Kansas State team looked like, when it's all said and done, when this game was all said and done, it looked like the team that we saw at the beginning of the year, the 7-1 team all year round. Let's get to a couple of these comments before we head to a break real quick. I like this one. Robbie Schultz says the ultimate uni curse is broken. Well, I don't know about that. I know we have a lot of issues about the white helmets and all that good stuff. But we got another from Brady as well. Glad the white lids aren't cursed. Okay, well, maybe you guys think it's not cursed. I think that we'll still hear some conversation about that next season. The whole alternate uniform thing, I don't think that's going away anytime soon. But it's definitely some fun things to talk about. Dylan Edwards, wow. I mean, there's no doubt about that, Willie. I completely agree with you. I mean, what Dylan Edwards shown right here. I put a tweet out during the game, and I was almost thinking about leading the show off with that tweet. I was so excited about seeing Dylan Edwards perform. And if you weren't excited about Dylan Edwards being your running back number 1 in 2025, right now is a good time to start, because what he is going to do with this offense, the explosive offense around him. And if you get, what we're going to see from these other guys, we're getting some tall receivers coming in from 2025. We have a really good recruiting class coming in, and you surround it with speed like that. I mean, how can you not be excited for what's coming in 2025, regardless of the end right here, regardless if we only finish the season with 9 wins, regardless if you started off 7-1, had a rough go at the end of the season, really had a blunder of a first half in the bowl game. You ended fantastic. You have great momentum, just like the National Signing Day, just like the portal started to ramp up towards the end. There's a lot of momentum with this Wildcat staff right now, with this Wildcats team. And I'm only looking forward to seeing what happens as we head into these dull months, if you will, heading into spring. All right, let's take a quick break real quick. There's lots to talk about here on this live episode of Locked On Kansas State. First, I'm going to talk to you about FanDuel. The NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get in on regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook right now. New customers can bet just $5 and win $250 in bonus bets if you win that first $5 bet. FanDuel has so many ways to pick up a W. If you love betting on players to score a touchdown, for example, Travis Kelce's just got that record-breaking touchdown for Chiefs, right? You could have had that bet just last Sunday. Check that out at FanDuel. Visit FanDuel.com today to join FanDuel.com for your chance to win $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment count with FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. I mean, how fun is this, right? We get to celebrate a bowl win. It's the last Kansas State game that we have in 9 months for football. So that's the unfortunate part of this conversation, but we get to go off on a high note. And the high note is that Kansas State wins their bowl game 44-41 off a great offensive performance led by Avery Johnson, Dylan Edwards, Jace Brown, and the rest of the offensive staff. I will say this about the offensive line, and I usually go back. My process is I usually watch games twice. That's just my usual process, and I dig into things later on as we go. So later on this week, probably next week, you'll hear me talk more about positions as we talk about the portal and we talk about the recruiting class, and then we're still going to dig about some of this stuff with this game. I'll dig into more of the offensive line and how I feel, because I like to watch the game as a whole, like almost as a fan, and then I dig into my processes. But what I'll say initially about the offensive line is I think they performed really good. There were some moments where Avery was pressured a little bit more, but for the most part, I think this offensive line looked pretty stout. There were some moments where the offensive line didn't look great, but I would point that at Avery a little bit, and the reasoning would be that he would leave the pocket, and that could have been the design play or things like that. So I don't want to point too many fingers, but I don't want to give the credit away from the offensive line. But he would leave the pocket when the pocket was perfectly protected, and it would force those defensive linemen to chase him, and it would cause Avery to either back up way too far, making a bad pass, or having you throw the ball away. But overall, I think the offensive line did good. So let me know, do you think the offensive line was great? We have a great offensive line, even though we've talked about the concerns of them all season long. I think they still won awards, which is crazy. We expect greatness out of this position group from what we've had from years past, but I think they performed good. So let me know in the comment description below what you think. And again, let me know who your MVP is, and let's make it fun. Who was the MVP of this game? And his name was not Dylan Edwards. Let me know in the comment description below. The biggest issue on the defense, and it happened earlier in the game, I think they made good halftime adjustments. But like Rutgers, they had a very hard time controlling the edge. Rutgers was out without their star running back, just like DJ Giddens for Kansas State. But they had some really good players, and I think Rutgers is going to be in a good boat, just like Kansas State is next season with their running game. Antoine Raymond played very well for Rutgers. He was probably the best player on that team. He went for 18 carries, 113 yards and 3 touchdowns. He did have that really big 65-yard carry. And to be honest, that 65-yard carry probably was a 4-yard carry if VJ Payne makes the right cut to make that tackle. What's crazy about that, though, is VJ Payne still ran him down. He's fast. But if you would have made that stop, it probably would have been a 4-yard carry. So just small adjustments. But looking at that defense controlled, had a hard time controlling the edge. That was really tough to see. But that's an easy fix, hopefully, moving into the season. Hopefully with some new people coming in, hopefully what's the changes to the transfer portal and the recruiting class and what we see moving forward in 2025, that'll fix that problem. The secondary obviously had some concerns as well. You go without Jacob Parrish. You knew you're going to have some issues with that. If you watch Kansas State football all season long, you knew the defense was going to have some sort of issues, right? I think we're fair to say that. Now, this is some of the most points that Rutgers has scored all season long. That's upsetting. That's a concerning fact. We are talking about a bowl game, though, so take it as you will. But the secondary without Parrish struggled a little bit. But there were some players that I was really excited to see. And I'll start with Zayshawn Rich. I'll start with him first, freshman. And he started off on a rough start. He was flat. He was on an island on a one-on-one play. He let up a really big pass. And that was like really the first taste that Rich had in this game. And that was unfortunate. But I think he bounced back really good in the second half. He really took care of some of those adjustments that whatever's made in the locker room. I think Rich capitalized on whatever they were. And I saw some really good things from him moving forward. Excuse me. With that being said, I really enjoy what I saw from some of these younger players. And although we have some questions about what the secondary is going to look like moving forward in 2025, yes, we got some really nice transfers coming in, some really good safeties. Who's going to play Jack? Who's going to play strong safety? We might have had our answers in the portal. Really excited to see what Gunner and Moss will do once they get here. But seeing the players that we got in this bowl game, and some of the young players like Zayshawn Rich, I liked what I saw from Jack Fabris, not a defensive back, but I like what I saw from Jack Fabris. And then Donovan McIntosh, I really like what I saw from him as well in some of the young play. So really, really looking forward to that portion of it, right? Because we didn't know what to expect from the secondary. And I think that's the biggest question mark still heading into 2025. I think we got our answer a little bit more with the wide receiver group. I think the players that are still on staff that we saw in this game played really well. I think we have a good idea of what we're getting coming in the portal. But the defensive secondary is still a question to me. So I think I got the most answers out of that. At first, yes, not great, but things changed very well in the second half, and I was really excited to see that. Let's end off the defensive side of this one with, the interception, Daniel Cobbs. What an interception that was. That was a pretty good play overall by him. Let's tie something into this. Let's tie special teams into this as well, because there's always been some concerns all season long with special teams. It's almost been like the kryptonite of this squad with special teams. And it almost was once again. They let up a couple really bad kickoff returns. They put Rutgers in really good prime positions. That's got to get addressed in 2025, this offseason. They really got to do a better job at special teams. That has been a big issue. We didn't have any bobbled PAT attempts. At least that's a win. No mess up field goals. Now, for the record, they didn't take as many because they went for so many 2-point conversions. But at least there's that side on the special teams. Saw a lot of things on social media about the referees, penalties, things like that. So it's like a two-edged sword, in my opinion. It's either you get excited that they're not calling a lot of plays or letting the kids play, but on the other side, you get upset because they're not calling penalties. So it's hard to pick what side you want to go on. In my mind, obviously, I think that there was some calls that were missed. There's no doubt about that. Now, we'll say on both sides. Looking at the stats, Kansas State did get more penalties than Rutgers did overall. 5 penalties to Kansas State for 47 yards. Only 1 penalty Rutgers for 5 yards. I think the biggest ones that bugged me, and there was some egregious offensive penalties not being called, like offensive pass interference that wasn't called, things like that. But the late hits out of bounds, especially the 2 to Dylan Edwards, those bugged me. And I think those needed to be called regardless of if you're letting the kids play. Personal fouls, late hits, things like that, especially ones that involved the helmet. There was one that was a helmet hit to Dylan Edwards. That was egregious, and that needed to be fixed. All right, before we go to the next segment, I got some comments here. Let's dig into them. Here we go. ASU fan here. All right, Jamario. Happy for you guys. Came back and won the game, repping the Big 12 as well. Well, you guys are going to rep the Big 12 here in the college football playoffs, so I hope you, obviously, we're rooting for you, and we got somebody also in the chat rooting for you as well. Ooh, I got a Horns Down on a Kansas State podcast. Look at that. Love to hear that. Sterling, Jackson will hit the portal in the spring. Well, interesting if you think that's the case. I hope that's not the case because I like the whole thunder and lightning aspect of seeing Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson. I don't think it's going to happen. I think the fact that DJ Giddens left for the draft, I think it opens up a wide opportunity for both Dylan Edwards and Joe Jackson to do their thing. I think they contrast off themselves really nicely. I think they do a really good job between the two, the offensive side. I think we saw it today, 25 rushes for just under 250 yards between the two of them. I don't think that's going to happen, but spring, it's a long off season. We'll see what happens finding out moving forward. All right, here we go. What is moving forward? That's a good question. What do we have moving forward? Then if you have any questions for the off season, let me know in the comment description below. Let's finish that off with this show here at Locked On Kansas State. All right, let's talk about Game Time. If you are looking for new tickets or anything like that, this is the perfect app for you to check out Game Time. The Big 12 opens play college basketball this weekend against Cincinnati. Yes, I know we're on a high note right now talking about Kansas State football, and then I have to try and bring it down to talk about Kansas State basketball, right? Let's see if we can get on a good note here and talk about Game Time. Game Time is the perfect place for you to find the lowest price tickets for any live event you have coming up. I love Game Time because it has all-in-one pricing. The worst thing in the world is when you think you have a $20 seat, you hit checkout, and you are paying $50 because of all those fees. Because of Game Time, you get all-in-one pricing. Toggle the feature. It shows you up front, no surprise fees at checkout. Get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. It has the lowest price guarantee as well. And Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if you find something different. So with that being said, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem code Locked On College for $20 off. What time is it? It's game time. And let's wrap this up here at Locked On Kansas State. Again, if you have questions, comments, anything you want to add into the show, I'd be love to talk to you on the show. We got plenty to talk about here. I do see we got a few people watching, so thank you so much again. And if you haven't subscribed yet, please click that subscribe button. We're shooting for 200 subscribers by the end of the year as we just gotten this show started off, and we'd love to have you join this adventure. We got plenty to talk about all season long. We're going to be covering both the men's and the women's basketball because there's a lot of things to talk about on there. There's no doubt about that, good and bad. And we're going to be talking about transfer portal. College football conversation is not going away. We will be talking about that every single week until they kick it off again in spring and next season when they get to Dublin. There's lots of things to talk about with this one. But with that being said, Kansas State wins the football game 44-41. Fantastic win. I think Avery Johnson, looked really good in this one. If you look at it, especially on the second half, I think he made some really key adjustments, and that's a lot to be excited about moving forward on this one. Again, I like some really young defenders. I really thought that Zayshawn Rich, Zach Fabris, Donovan McIntosh looked really good in this one. Biggest issues is that defense. And I think we're going to get a lot of those answers when we figure that out from the portal, when we figure it out from the recruiting class. But when you control this edge, if you find a way to control the edge in this game, Kansas State probably wins by 2 scores, right? Because that was the biggest issue, was finding a way to control the running game. And they didn't even have their top running back in the eyes of Rutgers, just in the same case that Kansas State had. Dylan Edwards had himself a fantastic game. I hope this was the coming out party that we all hoped and expected for. I think we can take a step back and ask ourselves, why didn't we see those jet sweeps from guys like Dylan Edwards and Jace Brown all season long? Why didn't we see that? But at least we're getting it now. Hopefully that was not just a bowl thing. Hopefully that was a taste of what is to come for this Kansas State offense. They have lots of speed on this team. There's a lot of things to be excited about moving forward. Offensive line, I thought they did a pretty good job overall. I thought they did a really good job. I think there were some moments that they did allow some pressure, but overall, I think they played really good. I want to know your thoughts, though. So let me know in the comment description what you think about this game. And do you think this has any motivation moving forward for the rest of the transfer portal? There's a couple days left in the portal. Do you think that this helps bring in some more, some guys? I mean, we still obviously have some players to go to. This was a slow week for Kansas State in the portal because they turned their focus to bowl week. There's 2 more days, technically. The 28th is when players can, stop entering the portal, but it doesn't mean they can't stop committing by then. So what does that mean for Kansas State? Do they still need to go get more players? What position do you think they still need to go at? I personally would love to see at least one more wide receiver and one more cornerback, because I do think that, especially after what we saw this week, this game from the secondary, I'd love to just get one more. But the recruiting class hopefully could fill some of those voids. I just don't know how much you can rely on a freshman, right? There's just a lot of things to take forward to. Love all the comments that came in. Thank you so much for this show and for joining in. If there's no other comments, though, I'm going to end this one with a fantastic season overall for Kansas State for football. I think they played well. Yes, they started off 7-1 and 9-4, but you got to take your wins where you can get it. Now the shift focuses to the offseason, to picking up those last pieces in the transfer portal. And then all eyes are on Dublin. Isn't that wild to say? That we're only, we're 9 months away from football, but all eyes are already focusing on Iowa State when it comes to college football. As for the Big 12, I'm a Big 12 believer. There's no doubt about that. I see an Arizona State fan in the chat, and I'm with you as well. Arizona State, I hope you do some business on New Year's Day and do some good things for the conference. But that's going to wrap it up for this show here at Locked On Kansas State. We'll be back here with another episode tomorrow. We're going to break down more of the show. We're going to preview the men's conference basketball game coming up this weekend. We got so much for you here on Locked On Kansas State. Thank you so much for joining. We'll be back here for another episode tomorrow.